Before we start this episode, I wanted to tell you that if you're looking for free dog training courses, you can take the Victoria Stilwell Academy's most popular free course, Building Your Dog's Confidence, right now by going to vsdogtrainingacademy.com. That's vsdogtrainingacademy.com. Okay, now on with the podcast. Hi, everybody. Welcome to this wonderful Zoom webinar and to everybody who's listening on the podcast. I'm here with my lovely team again today, Jamie, Tara, Laura, Tiffany, Ali, Wendy, Lorena, and Maya, and we're going to be talking about the harmony model. I hope that you are well wherever you are and from wherever you are joining us today. Those of you who are joining us live, you can type in the chat as well. So anything that you would like to, maybe a few questions that you'd like to ask as we talk about the harmony model and what it is and why harmony is so important, and that what are the essential elements to living in harmony with your dog. And we are very pleased that lots of people are joining us. I love these group discussions. Usually my podcasts are one-to-one, which I also love. But I really love these group discussions where we can kind of delve deep and geek out on the subjects that we choose. So it is spring, and I hope that wherever you are enjoying beautiful spring weather. I know we are here in Atlanta. And yes, so I mean, that kind of makes me think of harmony and rebirth and people getting puppies and, you know, an adoption, because now there's more time for people to spend with their dogs as the spring and summer months come. And it's a lot nicer walking your dog out. So we do find that actually there's more and more people that like to adopt and get a puppy or an adult dog at this time. And what do they need? They need harmony. So I'm going to pass this over to Ali, and she's going to talk about the harmony model. And we're going to talk about each part of the harmony model, which is so awesome that stick around because you're going to learn a hell of a lot. Ali.
Yeah, thanks. The first thing I want to mention about the harmony model is that it has 5 components that are all interwoven. And the reason that the harmony model was created was because positive training is, yes, it's about dog training and it's about teaching your dog life skills. But in the past, we've talked about positive training as you manage the dog's behavior or you manage the environment, and then you train an alternative behavior. And while that can be very effective, we felt like there was something missing. That, yeah, I could put my dog behind a baby gate to stop jumping on people. And yeah, I can teach them to sit or stand instead of jumping on people or going to mat. But it doesn't really address the dog's need for that connection, that interaction with people, and the need to jump or get that energy out. And what's missing is really kind of communication, but then also enrichment. And if you just ran your dog before people came over, that can make such a big difference. Or if you just let your dog out in the yard. So even sometimes the smallest differences, you could have a huge lift on the training side. So I had clients that would spend 30 minutes a day training, which is a lot for a client that's, didn't train at all before. And if they were that consistent, I'd be impressed. But what they realize is that if they just did 5 minutes of enrichment, that could do just as much as 30 minutes of training a day. So that's why we created the harmony model, is to almost have a check to see, are all the elements in balance, to see if there's an easier way to solve this problem, and to double check that the solution to your training problem works for both you and your dog. Because we want our dogs to be healthy, both mentally and physically, before we start training. So the harmony model consists of 5 elements of harmony. There's, of course, positive training. There's also safety and wellness. So safety is important. We want both the dog and the people around the dog to be safe. There's communication, because yes, it's important to do training, but if your dog isn't really understanding your training, that's a big part of it. We want to have two-way communication. So we all want to listen to our dogs and we want to speak to our dogs. And what I mean by listen to them is observe dog body language. We also have socialization. So this is while we can do training in certain situations, we want to be sure that our dog is able to thrive in any environment. And while they may not thrive in every environment, we can at least help them cope or tolerate or exist and just be in some environments, as Victoria would say. And then, of course, the last element of harmony that I mentioned was enrichment. So these are the 5 elements of harmony: positive training, socialization, communication, safety and wellness, and enrichment. And these are the things that we want to blend together before even we start tackling a problem. Because if one of those elements of harmony is off, that can create an issue both between the dog and the person. These dogs' needs and wants are not necessarily met.
The focus that, the reason why you say that is the focus for a long time has, I think when people get their dogs, they're like, immediately we're going to teach them how to do this and this and this and this. And that's great. But, as I've always said with trainers that come to learn with VSA and to any client that I have, is that, that's great. And you've got to know, how to do it. But that's not going to work to solve any or prevent or solve any behavior issues. Doing those kind of basic manners, behaviors, or skills, or cues, commands, whatever you want to call them, that's not going to help. What's really going to help is looking at these 5 elements. And so when we're looking at sort of safety and wellness, we kind of put that at the top of the board. And the reason why we put that at the top of the board for safety and wellness is because if dogs don't feel safe wherever they are, inside or outside the home, then learning is going to be compromised.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think we often assume that dogs are safe because we know they're safe. But if you've ever been in an unfamiliar situation, you know that knowing you're safe and feeling safe are 2 very different things. And also, if we don't have communication, like you were talking about, Allie, we may not know whether animals are truly safe. If you're an animal and you're in pain, you may have a reasonable belief that this isn't a good place for you, that this isn't safe for you to do. You mentioned behaviors like sit. If your hips are really hurting and I'm asking you to sit in front of things that you're not sure about anyway, and I wouldn't be at all surprised if you developed an idea that that thing is not safe for me, it hurts me. So we want to think about safety, though, broadly, not just knowing it, but making sure that our animals feel it. If they don't feel it, they're not going to learn. I wouldn't learn. I don't know about you, but I wouldn't learn. I'd be looking for a way out of there. So we want to make sure that we're addressing that issue along with it.
Yeah. Now, we've got one member of our panelist is right in the thick of it right now, and she's just got a new, amazingly adorable puppy. And it's Tara. And as you're experiencing this right now, what is the most important, essential element with your puppy that you have started with bringing this new puppy into your home?
The very first, so we picked her up and we were picking her up in California. And we decided we were going to stay in a hotel for a few nights before flying home, which is a 5-hour flight from LA to Florida. So for those few nights, I was like, I don't care if she learns to sleep in a crate. I don't care if she learns to sleep in a pen. I don't care about all of those things. The only thing that I care about right now is that she knows my husband and I have her back. So she stayed with us the entire night in the bed. I was just very cognizant of when she would get up so that I could get her to her potty patch, so that she knew that I had her and she was safe and she was comfortable. And we had 3 beautiful nights, followed by time in the airport where we arranged it so that she would be taken care of in the airport. I had an expandable bag for her. We worked on that bag. That was the only thing that we worked on during our stay at the hotel, so that she felt very comfortable in her little travel bag. It expanded. So when we got to the airport, we got set up in an area. I was able to unzip and give her more room in there with all of her things, including my hand, which was probably not the best thing during Shark Week, but um, so we were, she felt very, very safe. She did beautifully there. We were treating her the whole time. And then we got on the plane. She did beautifully there. And I really think it's because there was no pressure on her. It was just, you're with two people that have you no matter what. And if we need to make a change, we will. We can cover your crate, or little bag rather. We can do all of those things to help you through this. And like her entire experience at the vet leading up to that, because we had to go get a health certificate, she did amazing there. He was like, do you think you need anything for the flight? And I'm like, I don't think so. He's like, I don't think so either. So I know I'm rambling, so I apologize. But yeah, it was absolutely just that safety aspect. And it's been that way through everything that we've done up so far.
So you didn't teach her to do anything. You just, you created this whole environment and this expectation and this, that she was going to feel safe, and she was safe. She trusted you and your husband. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the essential part of it. And again, please, I'm not saying that you don't do this. You don't teach your dog to sit and stay and come when called, but that, even when you get an adult dog from, you adopt an adult dog, that's not, this is kind of the reason why we're talking about this, because this is so important. Ali, moving on from that safety and wellness, the wellness portion of it is really important as well. What do we mean by wellness?
Yeah, wellness. And I like that we started off with a puppy, because I think we easily think about like kids and puppies as we want them to be well. We want them to be healthy in mind and body, but we also want them to be like well-rounded in the sense that they have a lot of different interests and activities, and they get to be outside. They get to be they can be calm inside. So I think we think about that very naturally with puppies, of like, oh, I want my puppy to be well socialized. I want to communicate well with my puppy. I want my puppy's life to be enriched, and I want my puppy to be well. So we take our puppy to the veterinarian. We make sure that our puppy has fresh water, has great food, and has a nice, safe place to go be. So we want to be sure that our dog is well, but we also want to be sure that they do feel safe, like Tara said. But that's what the Harmony model does well, is that it looks at the whole picture. So again, just like we picture with kids, we want to be sure that our dogs are well-rounded. But what's neat about the Harmony model is not only does it apply to puppies, but it also applies to adult dogs and dogs in different scenarios. So you may be a shelter volunteer, and while you think, oh gosh, it would be really difficult to apply the Harmony model in a shelter, it definitely would be more difficult than, say, Tara and her wonderful, what sounds like a magical puppy house that she's planned for her puppy. But if you're responsible for like taking a dog out of his shelter environment every day and take him into a run or something, you could introduce different elements of Harmony every day. So to be sure that he's well, rather than making him sit in the shelter, you could have him go sniff things. You could bring him different leaves from the parking lot in the run. You could maybe bring him different toys, and you can double check that he's gotten the vet care that he needs. So there's different things that you can do to help that dog feel well. Maybe that dog just needs to sit and listen to you read, or just sit and be with you while you're on your phone and not interacting with him and not making it all about your scary eyes and hands, as we often do with shelter dogs. So, we make really loud noises and we talk to them. Our eyes get really wide. I'm very guilty of those, but sometimes just sitting and being is best. So I do like that we can apply this Harmony model, not just to puppies in the perfect scenario, but to shelter dogs as well.
And, you and I and other members of this panel have had a lot of interaction and a lot of experience volunteering, working in, doing assessments in shelters with all kinds of dogs, haven't we? So we see that that's really important, that actually some of the things that people just inherently do, because that's what you do in front of a dog, can be very freaky. So it's understanding that as well. Okay, I want to go on to this next element of socialization and how kind of positively in VSA think about socialization. Tiffany.
Yeah, so socialization, I think over my career in dog training, I'm so proud of the fact that we have gotten the word out there just in general about socialization. However, I think that sometimes it got a little muddled and a little confusing to a lot of pet parents on, and especially with new puppies, on what exactly we are thinking about, what exactly we are talking about. So I love the fact that VSA and Positively are really kind of honing in through the Harmony model and other courses and articles that we have on truly thinking about socialization as a thoughtful and careful exercise. So it's not about just, hey, I have to expose my puppy or my newly adopted dog to a million things as quickly as possible, so they see a vacuum and they see a man with a hat and they see a motorcycle and they see a this and they see, but it's more about, yes, we would like them to experience things and experience new people and places, but in a thoughtful way and in a way that we are paying attention to how they are experiencing it. So that goes back to the communication, the two-way communication that Ali and you were talking about, Vic, and also the having the dog's back that Tara mentioned. I've always stressed so much to my own clients about, when you're socializing and you're allowing your dog to experience something new, pay attention to what they're telling you through their body language, which of course is something else that is very important to learn, how our dogs communicate to us and with us. But when you're seeing that body language, give them some space if they're telling you they need space. Don't just keep them where they are because you think you have to expose them to this thing. They're telling you it's a little too much. So having their back and allowing them to know that, or helping them realize that they can trust you in those situations, that you will have their back, and that you might take them to experience something and then see that it's a bit much, and you will listen to them and allow them some more time or some more space. I think that is honestly the best gift. And I probably said that here in one of our other podcasts before, but I really think that's the best gift that we can give our dogs, is to listen and to have their back and to get them out of a situation that might be a little too much for them, and then regroup. And it's not that they can't ever go back to that, but pay attention to what it was that kind of scared them or made them uncomfortable, and tweak it slightly so that the next time you can have a really great experience.
I feel like certainly when people get new dogs, new family members, that there's a lot of touching. There's a lot, they all want stroking, and let's pick the puppy up, and there's a lot of handling, and sometimes there has to be handling. And some dogs can handle that. They can cope with that and tolerate it. Others can't. But if you do it in the right way, you can get to a point where your dog can be more tolerant of meeting new people, or a bit more sort of socially gregarious. Maya, can you talk about the socialization that we're thinking of? It's not just physical socialization, is it? When we talk about socialization, we humans socialize a lot without actually having to touch one another. And we can socialize at a distance. So it's not just all about, socializing means I got to get my puppy or my dog to go play with other dogs, to interact with a whole load of people, to be touched all the time.
Absolutely. And I think actually that meets both guardians' needs and dogs' needs more often than we think that it does. Somehow, I think, as you said, Tiff, somewhere along the line of telephone, the game of socialization telephone, things got a little confused. And the only socialization that counted was direct, intense interaction with whether it's your dog with a person, or your dog with another dog, or your dog with an object. But Tiffany and I just came back from a large conference. I think it had like 1,500 attendees. I brought an adult dog to that conference. And I can count on one hand the number of people I actually touched while socializing, right? Post-COVID, we don't even shake hands, but we still made connections. We made friends. And my dog probably got a lot more petting than that. But that kind of varsity, I'm going to call it like varsity level socializing for us, right? And as well as for Pony, for my dog, that kind of socialization is not built by taking a new dog to that kind of conference.
Yeah.
It's not built by that. It was, in the case of my dog, who's a rescue, it's really built by having a lot of time to take in the world at a distance before I would ever put him into that kind of scenario, and building our communication. so that I can honor, as Tiffany, as you were just saying, so that I can honor those moments where he says, nope, I need a break, I need a nap, this is too much for me. Or conversely, I can tell when he wants to greet a stranger, and I can keep monitoring that for him as we go.
I think that's important to recognize as well, because some dogs just really want to go say hi.
Yeah, they absolutely do. I wouldn't say though that my dog grew up on a ranch. He, in a barrel. He didn't actually interact with a lot of people before he came in. So building it was something that I wanted to do really thoughtfully. If he didn't want to do it, I would never ask him to do it. But I also knew that he would never want to do it unless I socialized him in a way where he had a lot of control. And that I think you can build. Sometimes I think we think of dogs as social or not social. We think of people that way too. But I bet all of us can think of social situations where we would say, get me out of here, and other social situations where we actually would seek them out. So knowing those and knowing how to build those, I think is an important part. And it's lifelong. I don't have the interactions and chance that, Tara, that you get to have with your new puppy. I didn't get to have those with actually any of my dogs because they all came to me after that window was closed. But that did not mean that I stopped thinking about socialization for them.
That's really important. The other important thing about this is, you should just get your puppy will get used to it. Jamie, I hear that all the time.
I've had a lot of clients who have had some behavioral issues come up because they were told basically harass your puppy as much as you can so that they're getting used to it. So this was shoving their hand in their food bowl. This is bugging them while they're eating. This is constantly touching them. And I think a lot of times we've all dealt with people who now have a puppy that is touch averse, or we have a dog who is resource guarding because we've taught them we will not let them be safe while they're eating. And just things along those lines. And so I think it's also important to just mention that harassing the puppy to get them used to it is not what we're looking at for. We're looking for positive experiences with novel stimuli versus just experiences in general, like Tiffany was talking about earlier.
But it's what a lot of people get told, isn't it, in the beginning, that so your dog doesn't become a resource guarder, or they know that you're in charge of the food, that you do put your hand in and you do kind of, of course, you should be able to touch your dog whenever you want to touch your dog. And your dog really doesn't have any say in it. I always go, oh my gosh, what would happen if the roles were reversed and your dog says, okay, now human, I am able to put my paw in your dinner plate whenever I want. And also, I'm allowed to kind of put my hand in your food whenever I want and touch you while you're eating. You'd say, absolutely not. Why has this kind of myth gone out there? I think that traditionally, that's what we were taught a long time ago, of like, this is how you do it. But actually, it's not a great idea.
I know I don't like people petting me while I eat either, so...
That's true. Well, okay. Well, moving on. Ali's face is like, yeah, gross. So Ali, talking about communication now, this is the third part of this. This is the third element that we need to create harmony.
Yes. And I think a big part of communication is listening and talking. Listening and responding. And that kind of ties into what we were talking about with consent. So Maya, can you talk about no and yes before I talk about the two-way communication?
Yeah, absolutely. I really think that for our dogs, we need to contextualize what our situation is with our own dogs, which is that by the time they come to us, they probably had a lot of experiences they didn't ask for. They've been handled in ways where they didn't have a lot of choice, and it may have been for their good. I'm not saying that we should allow our dogs total freedom to run into the street, right? There may be times where we have to restrain them. But because of that, it's made me think a lot about teaching my dogs to say no before I start teaching them how to say yes. And what I mean by that is picking for your puppy or for your newly adopted dog, or even your dog you've had for a long time that you haven't conceived of that way, thinking about choosing a behavior that they're doing that will cause whatever is happening to stop or go away. And when you teach that, let's say you're petting, and you have a dog who looks in a particular direction or touches your hand with their nose and you withdraw your hands, whether that was their way of saying no to begin with, it will become their way to say no. And once you have that communication, you can start to see, okay, when are they actually saying yes? So I'm not saying that no always has to come before yes, but given our usual relations with our dogs, that power imbalance that we have with our dogs, I found that it's really, really helpful to teach a no. It can be an arbitrary signal. As long as you honor it and respect it, it will become a way that the dog can say, that's enough, thanks, I'd rather not.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Maya. And I kind of want to use a common example that I hear that if we're talking about pet peeves, I'm just going to talk about one of my pet peeves for a second with communication. I will say, in some ways, two-way communication can be seen in what goes viral sometimes as dogs talking with buttons. So the dogs push a button and it says something, and then the person does something as a response. And I think that actually originally came from a study with Andre Rossi, and then what was his principal person's name? I'm not going to remember off the top of my head, but it was called A Dog and a Keyboard. And they had 6 buttons that meant something very specific. And this was a very regimented master's level study at the time. It was a study of 1, so that's something. But it was very interesting that they videoed everything. They videoed the dog's attention, the person's attention, and they taught very specifically. So, for example, if the dog asked or pushed the potty button, they took the dog out the exact same way to this exact same potty patch, waited for an exacting amount of time. So for like 2 minutes, and then they went inside, and there was no treat, there was no reward, there's no any reward, there was no tangible reinforcer other than getting the to go potty. There was, no sniffing, no novel play with a human or another dog. So it was very interesting that it was very regimented, which is, I think, a little bit different than the protocols I've seen on, if I can call them protocols on, now I'm getting on my soapbox, on Instagram. But what I'm getting at here is that if we want to truly have two-way communication with our dogs, why is it that we make them talk our way? Why do we make them use these buttons that teach them to use quote unquote English, which they don't, by the way? But why do we have to listen to their body language? Why can't we listen to their body language? Why do we
Here. Sorry, I just got really excited.
Right?
I just had to say, absolutely. Bloody buttons. Carry on.
I was just frustrated because the original study was meant to have a human try harder to understand what the dog was looking for. And they believed that the easiest way to bridge this communication gap between dog language and human language was this button that they knew they could teach in an operant way to mean something to both the dog and the human. But the humans did a lot of work to make sure that they were on the same page. Whereas now I see like a really rough version of that going viral on social media. And it gets me really frustrated because now it's just become more like the dog is quote unquote talking, but that the dog I doubt in many situations really understands like syntax. Dogs have a different idea of syntax than we do. But anyways, how you can implement two-way communication with your dog is, like Maya just said, look for something that they're already doing. So are they already turning their head away from something they think is scary? Are they already going to sniff something instead to be like, oh, look over here. Oh, is the sky blue? Oh, this is all of a sudden very interesting, rather than staring at this other dog? Or are they staring at that other dog saying, you are scary, I want you to go away? These are ways that we can listen to their dog body language, look at what they're doing with their eyes, their ears, their body, their tails, and then we can start to respond for them and say, like Tara said, I've got your back. Why don't we take a break and walk away? Why don't we go sniff instead? So this is how we can start to implement two-way communication with our dogs, but in a dog-friendly way. Again, doing things like Maya said that they're already doing.
Are you a dog trainer looking to take your knowledge and skills to the highest level? Or maybe you're a dog guardian, interested in figuring out whether your love of dogs can translate into more of a career than a hobby. Or are you already working in the pet industry, but recognize that you need to fill some gaps when it comes to how to manage dog behavior so that you can better serve your existing clients? No matter where you are on your journey, the Victoria Stilwell Academy has courses that can help you get to where you want to go. From our free Building Your Dog's Confidence starter course, to the powerful fundamentals of dog training and behavior course, all the way up to our flagship professional dog trainer course, we have options for every skill level and budget. All you have to do is be passionate about giving dogs the best lives possible. All of our courses are available online anywhere around the world 24/7. No gimmicky sales tactics where you need to act within a certain window to enroll. My amazing team at the Victoria Stilwell Academy understands that we need to be ready to serve you whenever the time is right for you to make the jump. Whether that means dipping your toes into our free courses or realizing your fullest professional dog training dream by enrolling in the dog trainer course. So, join the thousands of dog geeks like you that are a part of our amazing and supportive VSA family today. We have Academy specialists available to talk with you and figure out how we can help you reach your dog training goals, or you can enroll in a starter course for free right now. The Victoria Stilwell Academy. It's the future of dog training.
Soapbox dismounted.
No, that's all right. Laura, you had something to say.
Yeah, so pretty similar to what Ali was saying. What I do with my dog Cosmo a lot is he will come in and do check-ins with me. And obviously I can see him coming over and being like, oh, is this okay? And then I give him that cue to go, okay. And he knows that it's safe to carry on. I think that's really important, especially when we're doing off-leash walks, because he knows he can come to me and be like, is it safe, Mom? And I can be like, yes, it's fine. And then he's like, oh, I'm fine. I'm fine. I think that's really important to what Ali was saying.
Yeah, I love that. That shows such a great relationship, and a relationship based on trust. Lisa, who's in the chat, she's written that I taught my small dog the pickup cue. If he growls or walk away, he doesn't want to be picked up. If he waits after I ask, then I can pick him up. Great communication tool. It gives him agency. And I, as a small dog as well, I've taught her exactly the same, the pickup of, like I say, pick up. And if she wants to come to me and she wants to be picked up, she will come to me and she will angle her body with her bottom towards me so that I can reach down and pick her up. And as I'm reaching down, she kind of does a little bounce. Sometimes she's so excited that I'm going to pick her up that she literally leaps into my hands. And that's what you want. She understands. I always remember when I was teaching, I was doing a class for working dog handlers, police dog handlers. And it was really interesting because what I observed is how they were taught, which was on the choke chain. And, I would have loved to remove those choke chains, but that's what the department required. And so, but what they were taught is that whenever they change direction, they give a good yank, a good jerk on that choke chain and on that lead, and then to tell the dog that they're moving in another direction. And I was like, okay, let's try it this way. Let's first of all just see if you just changing your body without doing anything, without doing a check, without saying anything, you turn your body, will your dogs actually follow you? And if you have to change direction. And so they did it. And amazingly, they were amazed that their dogs were following them without having to do this check on the lead. And so, but they also wanted a word for it. So I said, sure, we can do a word for it. Let's tell the dog you are going to move before you move so that you can give them direction, right? Because you're going to need to do that at points. They're not always going to be watching your body all the time and sort of feeling how you're moving, right? Let's give them some cue to let them know that you are going to change direction. And let's use that. So we built up that cue and the change in those dogs. But the handlers had never been taught it. They'd always been taught that when you want to move, you give a good old check on that choke chain and you turn around. And so this blew their minds. Really, they didn't have to do it. And this seeing them now, these are Georgia cops, right? These are Southern cops, and they tend to be quite hard and quite harsh. And they, there's very different policing down here. But it was amazing that when they saw that there was a different way, that all they wanted was a better relationship with their dog. And to do this was something that was completely alien. So it's like that pickup cue with a smaller dog. You're telling your dog what you're about to do. And that's really important. Isn't it, Maya? We had talked about, I love dogs problem solving. I love dogs working things out for themselves. But my God, sometimes they need to understand what you're about to do, because A, you're very inconsistent. B, you're reading the room and outside in a different way than they are. So there has to be some kind of communication to tell your dog what you're about to do, not to put your dog into a sit and a stay or any of that, but to say, hey, I'm about to turn.
Yeah, totally. And I was just thinking about maybe a less harsh, but very common example that I think is exactly the same way. I see people always sitting down with their dog, and they'll stand up and start walking away. And the dog's first cue, if they were snoozing that they were walking away, is they feel a little tug on their leash. It's not as regimented, but it's the same deal. And so often I think we forget that if we want our dogs to communicate in subtle and quiet ways with us, we also need and can do that for them. We don't need a big jerk to tell them to turn around. In your example, a word might do, or a shift might do, with just a little bit of reaction time in there. And so often, once we build a communication system, if we're observing one another, and you better believe you don't need to teach your dogs to observe you. They're already observing you. So if you start observing your dog and responding as consistently as you can to their whispers, so to speak, then you don't have to hear their loud, big behavior either. And they will also respond to you. And by whispers, I saw a comment about what about for blind and deaf dogs? I don't necessarily mean literal whispers. Now, that might be appropriate for dogs who are hearing, but there are lots of ways in which dogs are using their senses to pay attention to the people around them and their whole environment around them. And if you watch your dog, you will start to see what those are. What is your dog cueing off? And can you move consistently with their body language and behavior? That works just as well for blind dogs and for deaf dogs as it does for dogs with all of their faculties. It just may be that you notice that what matters to your blind dog has more to do with scent, with noise. What matters to your deaf dog may have much more to do with sight and with changes in sight. And you may need to figure out ways to communicate such that you're using the channels that they have to do it.
And Lorena, that means that observation is key for whether we have a blind or a deaf dog, or a dog that is not hearing impaired or sight impaired. That the observation is key. I love when I work with clients just to say, hey, today, or at least the first part of the day, we're just going to observe. We're just going to watch what your dog does in different situations. I just want to observe. Wow, the information you can get from that.
Oh my God, it's ridiculous. And it's something that I think many of us, unless we're taught it in some way, one way or the other, we don't even realize that can actually be a thing. And observing your dog is really one way of just really getting to know them, getting to kind of start to pick up on their tells. And that's really, really super important. Just, to Maya's point, being able to understand what it is that they're already using to communicate certain needs or certain wants, and not just being able to identify them, but also to be aware that communication isn't always started by the human side. Communication many, many times can be started by the dog side. You want to make sure that we're listening or observing, that we're noticing what they're doing. And very importantly, we want to make sure that we respond appropriately, because that in itself is going to give the message to the dog that, yes, I am a reliable person. I'm a reliable guardian, and that will respond to your needs as well. And that's also going to, as far as the big picture is concerned, it really does add to the entire feeling of safety, of knowing that they are in a safe place with you. And so, yes, just sit down and just observe your dog. You don't have to do anything. You don't need to make them do anything. Just see what they're doing when they're playing with something. What happens if they get frustrated with it? How do they act with it? Or what happens when they get excited? Do do they pull back, real quick, or do they paw, just whatever it is that your particular dog does, start getting familiar with that. Start watching. You'd be really, really surprised at how much they're saying all the time.
Yeah. It's a great exercise. And I know, Ali, we talk a lot about this, don't we? About observation, especially at VSA. We teach our students about the importance of observation, almost becoming ethologists when they observe.
Yeah, it's so important to watch your dog. And I think as a person, I've tried to listen more and speak less. And I think it helps me a lot with my relationships. And I try and do the same with my dog. For example, if like, you were married to someone that speaks a different language than you, why make it more complicated to add a third language in the mix? I think that's kind of how I think of those buttons, rather than just, why don't you learn a little bit of their language and maybe they learn a little bit of yours. But I do want to give kudos to anyone who is trying, who is observing. I loved what Lorena and Maya said about observing dogs and trying to communicate with their dogs. We have a lot in the chat about people teaching their dogs different things and people having dogs. Lisa talked about their dog thanking me. And I kind of do believe that like dogs do almost give us like some sort of acknowledgement. I think there was that study done on saying you're sorry if you accidentally trip over your dog, that dogs glance at us more often. So I do think it's interesting that we do have these two-way conversations. And so I just want to encourage anyone. And again, kudos, even if you are using buttons, yes, I can get on my soapbox, but I don't want to hate, because people are buying things for their dogs. They're interacting with their dogs. They're trying to understand more about their dogs. But what I think, if anything, we could wrap up communication is the lesson is maybe to, rather than turning your dog into a tiny human, maybe get a bit more doggy. So do more observation, do more listening, and see what your dog is already doing so that you both don't have to learn a third language. You can learn more about each other's.
I love that, Ali. I love it. Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of buttons, but I do as well applaud people that are experimenting and trying things and building that communication and so kudos to anybody who's doing that. Now the second to last part of our element or part of the harmony model is enrichment. And I know we've done a whole podcast on enrichment, but you had said something, Ali, regarding, again, what we always teach, that when we use management in that, if we have to manage our dogs, let's say our dog is not that comfortable with guests when they come in, and maybe we have to use a baby gate to keep the dog away from the guests, which actually encourages and makes the dogs feel safer and makes the guests feel safer. But we don't just put a dog behind a baby gate and that's it, get on with it.
Right. We do want to give back, and we want to think about what is the function of the behavior. So rather than just stopping behavior, the dog's doing it for a reason, and that reason is working for that dog. That's why they're doing it. Those are the laws of behavior. So we want to think about why it is they're doing that and how can we fulfill that need in a different way. There's a great shift in the parenting world of, why is your kid having a tantrum? It's because they have big feelings and they're trying to communicate those feelings. So how is it that we can help your dog communicate these big feelings and or express these big feelings in a dog and human appropriate way? So for the dog, these are all dog appropriate ways, but they may not be very helpful as a human. Like, yes, I totally get that you don't want your dog jumping and clawing all over you when you come inside the door. We have some scratch marks on our door that is happening. And Vic, you said you don't want your dog's paw in your food. Yeah, that happens in our house with my wonderful husband's dogs. So we're working on enrichment a lot here, in that we want to allow them to paw and what we call bapping and running and playing and barking and chasing in a different environment. So if we do put up some sort of physical or theoretical barrier, we do want to see where is the give and take that we can allow the dog to be themselves and fulfill that function elsewhere.
You kind of use that we know that dogs have big feelings. Like when kids are throwing tantrums, that's a way of expressing emotion. You always feel sorry when you're at the grocery store, at the supermarket, and you got that that person with their child, and their child is just giving it large, and you're like, oh my gosh, I feel so sorry for you. But the person's really embarrassed, and I mean, that's the child communicating their big feelings, Wendy.
Yeah, it's so interesting, the parallels that you see. Specialists who work with children, they'll talk about externalizing behavior and internalizing behavior, and the big feelings people or little children, they go big with their feelings. It's all on the outside. And some children, turn into themselves, and so they're internalizing. But one of my favorite parts of what they share is when you see something, instead of thinking naughty, you might think needy. So what's that need? Instead of immediately thinking, oh, that child's being naughty. Well, actually, they're needy. And what is it? And maybe they're having, blood sugar low, and they just are thirsty, and they're screaming because their systems are going haywire. And the same thing can be for a little dog that's been out running around in the field too long, and it's really having trouble, winding down. And you can see it because you're the adult. So if we swap naughty with needy, then it's a great way we can borrow from parenting experts for this too.
Wendy, what you say is absolutely spot on. Because when we see a tantrum or when we see the dog behaving badly, we label, oh, that's such bad behavior. But it's actually, it's a child communicating their needs. It's a dog as well communicating their needs. And I see enrichment as well as truly looking at the dog that we have in front of us, and trying to sort, like, what do you need? What do you need from me? What do you need from the environment? Do you have breed specific needs? How important is that? And can I fulfill those needs? If your dog could sit you down and then you could speak in your tongue just for a little while, what would your dog say that they need from you? You might be actually really surprised. So yeah, I absolutely, I love what you say. And yeah, or they need a nap. Perfect for balancing the harmony model. It's so much we see that when kids get overtired, that they get grumpy, same as us, same as our dogs. And sometimes you can see this at the end of a training session, or you can see dogs that have just been out all day and they're exhausted and they get grumpy, they're exhausted, they're tired, and they need to sleep. And that again brings up the importance of sleep, doesn't it? I mean, my God, how important is sleep for us? And how cranky we feel when we don't get good sleep. And sleep is so important on a scientific level as well. But giving those children opportunities to have rest and sleep during the day, so essential for our puppies and so essential for our dogs as well. And then, of course, somebody just said, Matt, thank you so much for your comment. Being cranky is usually a sign of hunger for my Labrador, even after dinner. I know, I used to have a Labrador, and they're eating machines, and I get it. But who here has felt hangry? Definitely. I mean, pretty much I get really hangry. I get a bit lightheaded. I just like, oh my God, I can't really focus on anything. I can't really learn, which is a reason why we say, if you want your dog to do a training session or whatever, make sure your dog has eaten at least a little bit. Don't completely withhold food because you're going to do a training session. And so your dog is absolutely starving so that your dog works harder for you. That's not fair. That's not kind. So all of these things are so important, Ali, aren't they? Regarding how we kind of view when we see that our dogs are behaving badly. It could be all of these things and more.
Yeah. And that's why we have the harmony model, is to address really all of them at once so that you can solve this problem for you quickly and easily and in the most efficient method, rather than spending a lot of time in training when the answer is a nap or a meal. So I know, Maya, we had some questions in the chat and a question about separation anxiety in the Q&A. Would you want to answer that one?
Yeah, sure. So let me pull it up here. So the question is about the function of separation anxiety behaviors. And first of all, I love this question because I think that's probably the question that I want people to come in when they look at a behavior that they're not sure about is to ask, what is it doing for you right now? Before we change anyone else's behavior, a dog's or anyone else's, we need to honor that it's doing something for them right now, or they wouldn't be doing it. And we don't treat, at least I would suggest, we don't treat even behaviors that look as confusing as some separation related behavior does as irrational or crazy. We treat it as functioning for the individual. So what could those functions be? I think they might be as varied as there are dogs with separation related problem behavior, but some ones that might come up for some dogs, they may be seeking safety. It may be an attempt to get back to their safe spot. And maybe their safe spot is being with a particular person, or as we sometimes say, in any warm body will do kind of separation related behavior where it doesn't have to be a particular person, but it needs to be a human. Some dogs experience this when they're separated from other dogs, although I see that as rarer than being separated from people. So why would a dog bark or howl or eat the wall or pee? All of those behaviors may be the behaviors that happen before the person comes back and safety is restored for that dog. We may have other dogs who are behaving that way to escape other things like noises. And where we have a situation where we have a dog who had an experience while alone, a fire alarm went off or a truck backfired. We may not know anything about what started it, but all of a sudden now they perform some behavior to get away from that noise. And now they continue to perform that behavior when alone, even when the noise isn't around, or it starts when the noise starts and it continues for hours afterwards. So we could have lots of different things that might function that way. But the question would be for you, not for dogs in general, not for dogs with this label, but for you, dog, what is this behavior doing for you? And how can I get you to that function in ways, like you were saying, Allie, that are more acceptable and probably also a lot more pleasant for you? The kid who's having a big tantrum probably isn't having a good time, even if they need a nap, right? So we might want to help them ask for a nap in a way that isn't so loud. They don't have to scream to get their sleep needs met. And we might do the same for dogs.
Ali, there's a question in the chat, or as somebody has messaged saying that they're doing an animal management course and that putting a dog behind, or they've been told that putting a dog behind a baby gate is negative reinforcement. And but also putting a dog behind a baby gate is kind of good for when a dog is misbehaving. Yet how can we make being put behind a baby gate as a good experience? So what would you say to that?
Yeah, I would say that's a great segue into our final element of harmony, which is our positive training element. So this is where, and as positive trainers, we like to use positive reinforcement, but we use a multitude of things, including management. And this is where we can get kind of nerdy from a behavioral sense, because we can talk about the quadrants of positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, positive punishment, and negative punishment. And yes, they would be correct that you can use management. I wouldn't say management is a positive reinforcer. Obviously, this isn't something that we normally, when you're putting in a baby gate, you're taking something away. So removing it, that negative thing is what we mean when we're talking about the quadrants. But we don't need to get geeky about it. Instead, what we really just want to talk about is the function of it. So if the function of it is to if you are using it to address the dog's need to gain access to someone, you could put up a baby gate and instead, but if I wanted to put a bit more of a quote unquote positive spin on it, I'm mixing my quadrant and my colloquial terms, but I could put another person behind the baby gate so they could get play. We could put a snuffle mat. I could put a Kong. But I could also pair it with getting attention later. So maybe you have a cuddle session, or maybe someone sits behind them and reads a book or gives them pets or massages behind that baby gate. So there are ways to use it in a way that aligns with both positive training, which is a colloquial term for all of the things we do as positive trainers, managing the situation, teaching a life skill, but then we also can use positive reinforcement of adding something to the environment to make the behavior more likely to occur. So that would be like adding a Kong, hoping that calm licking behavior is more reinforced than jumping up on people.
Absolutely. We've had some messages in the chat as well, especially about as well the misbehaving when dogs and kids are having tantrums, or dogs are not behaving the way we'd like them to, that it could also be pain. And I think, Leslie, you make a very good point. We always look at that. I think that's part of the wellness part of our harmony model, is that we really try and look at not just the safety aspect, but as well as our animal in pain. And we know that there are dogs, many dogs that suffer kind of discomfort. Are they feeling unwell that day? Are they not just that they're hungry or that they've got a bad leg or something, but did they have a stomach ache? And or are they feeling exhausted? You know, that there's definitely things that we need to look at when it comes to pain. And yet, so the positive training, the idea of positive training has, I think, people get quite confused. Positively, we say that positive training encompasses everything that the harmony model does, and then teaching your dog life skills and coping skills and having fun and utilizing a lot of play. That's what positive training means to us. But it does have, it means different things to different people. And I also think that whatever your definition of positive training is, sometimes when people look at positive training and they think it's just literally that you give the dog food to teach your dog stuff. That's what positive training is teaching your dog a set of skills. But positively, our positive training definition is very different. It is this harmony model. It is following the positively, the four pillars or the positively pillars, I should say. That's what positive training is. Can anybody expand upon that? Because yes, it gets on I get on my soapbox about that. Maya.
Yeah, I think somewhere along the way, we thought that training was something that we did to dogs. We thought I know it's training if I am controlling the dog or controlling the piece of food, and I, in my head, am focusing on training. But training is teaching. That's all it is. And teaching is deliberate learning. So when we think about setting up an environment so that animals are learning the things that we want and experiencing the things that we want, we are being teachers. Our animals are also teaching us all the time, like we were talking about, and it should be going both ways, I think, in order to be a healthy relationship. So I do think that I would like to push for us to move toward using the language of teaching rather than training, because it sounds much more like what we mean by positive training. We mean guiding those who are dependent on us for their life, for their safety, for their well-being, to learn the skills and have the experiences that we want them to have. And yes, it can look formal, just like some of your learning probably happened while you were sitting at school, but it doesn't always look that way. You might have learned how to bake from somebody or how to cross the street from someone else. You may have learned how to tell a joke from sitting at the table with a family member. So all of those are ways that learning is happening and teaching is happening. And that's true for dogs as well. Anytime we're interacting with them and we're doing it thoughtfully, I would call that teaching or training.
I always think to my daughter when she went to school, the school that she went to, which is an amazing school, was, they definitely had some of that. The teacher's going to teach you stuff and you're going to sit and listen to it. But they had a lot of project-based learning so that the kids could become involved and they could come up and be creative and think of their own ideas. I still don't think schools do a great job. I think that's where parents or adult caregivers have to kind of step in and tell kids about how to live in the real world. But, that project-based learning was fun. And the kids, I just saw that Alex would come back and she would be so much more excited about a project they were doing. And I wish that at school that there was more of that. And when there was that, when we go on field trips or when we do a project or when we were able to be creative, that's when we all came alive. Yes, we did learn the other way as well by being taught. We absolutely learned that way. But this other way was much more fun. And can we take that element and use that for our dogs as well? Of how can we make this fun? It's not just, it's another thing that I've seen when people train the the usual basics, they tend to be quite serious, but then when they do tricks, that's when they smile. And so I feel like we always need be smiling, right? And we need to make it fun for the dog, because that's the best way that dogs learn. We are coming to the end of oh my God, this has been fabulous. Thank you so much for sharing us the Harmony model. If you want to learn more about the Harmony model, definitely go to positively.com and you will be able to see it on the website. But there's also a course you can take. It's a free course called the Harmony model. It's really interactive. It's great fun. And you get such a better idea of how to create harmony. And again, the 5 elements that you need before you start even that teaching process is really going to help you with your dog. Thank you to everybody on Zoom that has joined us live and that has communicated with us in the chat. We really, really appreciate that. We love getting your information and your questions and your comments. It's fabulous for people live, but also for people who are listening on the podcast. I hope that you've got a lot out of this. Go to positively.com and enjoy the Harmony model. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining me, and take care. Have a great week, and we will see you again. Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to Victoria Stilwell's Positively podcast. For Victoria's online dog training courses, more information, and helpful dog training tips, visit Victoria's official website at positively.com. Get connected on Facebook, Instagram, and other social media as Victoria Stilwell, and follow her on Twitter at Victoria S. Learn to become a professional dog trainer with the Victoria Stilwell Academy at vsdogtrainingacademy.com. And be sure to tune in next time as Victoria helps you and your dog live your best life together, positively.